Hey guys, thanks for joining me out there. Just wanted to say hello to everyone before we get started. We're just gonna wait for Justine, our special guest, to join us today. I'm here today. Essentially, we're going to be sitting down with Dr.Justine, who's joining me here. Thank you for joining me. She is the co-founder and chief science officer at Thursday PM Recovery Collagen.
Yeah,
Right?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Want to introduce myself briefly to my followers that don't know who I am. My name is Ruslys. I am a physiotherapist out of Toronto, Canada. I believe you're also from
I
Toronto.
am, yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to say my specialty is dealing with more concussions and vestibular issues, on top of the sports and orthopedic issues that I also deal with. So that's kind of sums up who I am, and part of the reason why I really wanted to sit down with you today is because I love your product, and where can I dive into essentially what Thirdsy is and why you thought it was a great idea to come up with it, but also why I love it. And we'll have a few questions for you that we can also share with our followers here, because a lot of them want to know, again, what is it? How's it going to help me? I've had a lot of people over the past few months that I've been kind of throwing it up there, promoting it, asking what it is, what's kind of the science behind it, and how's it going to help us. So that's kind of why I want to sit down with you and get your take on it. So if you can give me, before we begin, if you can give me a bit of a rundown, who you are, why you came up with this wonderful idea, that'd be something we'd love to all hear.
Yeah, for sure. It's I always love talking to different people, especially healthcare professionals who've tried our product and are using it, and then how they're using it, whether it's like for themselves or in their practices. And so I come from that world as well. So I'm trained as a chiropractor. I was in private practice for a number of years and took a very kind of holistic approach with our patients, and was working on a lot of, musculoskeletal issues and, chronic pain, that kind of stuff, but also was working with a lot of people who were young and healthy and wanted to maintain their function or improve their performance in different ways. And I found, after being in private practice for a number of years, I was just blown away with how many people slept really poorly. Even people who were otherwise like very healthy, like, exercising regularly, eating good food, taking care of themselves. And it was one of those things that people didn't have a lot of tools to manage. So, we'd have people who, if you feel tired when you wake up in the morning, you've got 20 different options for, name your different stimulant, right? Whether it's coffee or green tea or Red Bull or 5-hour energy or sugar or like whatever it is. There are so many things to get you from 0 to 60. But on the other side of that equation, when you get to the end of the day and you're looking for the off switch and you're trying to change your state in the other direction, there's not very many options, and particularly not very many healthy options, right? Like there's not a whole lot of people that I know who are health focused who want to be taking like a Z-Quil or a sedative or some sort of even things that are a little bit less intense, like say cannabis, right? Like there's, a time and a place for these things, but ultimately I think that when we're looking for different tools, which Thursday ultimately is, right? It's going to be a tool that has a specific kind of use case, to help to wind down, to help counteract overstimulation, to help you get really good quality sleep. There wasn't a lot. And then for myself, going into COVID, my sleep got much worse. And I think it was a product.
I don't think you're alone in that one.
No, it was like everybody, right? A product of being more anxious, being out of our regular routines, maybe not getting as much sunlight, going to the gym, doing all the things that we normally would, and just getting out of our daily rhythms. And all of a sudden I was getting that feeling of like waking up in the morning, feeling like I hadn't slept at all, and knowing that I had slept, and that wasn't my issue. It wasn't the falling asleep. It was actually waking up feeling rested. And so that was ultimately what led to the journey of figuring out, okay, what are things that I can start to take to support my body so that I'm doing this sleep process better? And I think that's like ultimately really where it starts. And I'm sure you see this a lot with, the type of work that you do is anything that you're working on is going to be a process, right? You just have somebody who comes in at various stages post concussion, and there is a process to getting better. And there's like incremental stages, and having your body change its function slowly over time can be really difficult. And I think sleep particularly has been a bit of a mystery in the health and wellness world for a really long time. We still don't really know that much about it. And so it's been much more of like an on-off function for most people. I sleep or I don't sleep, right? My sleep was good, my sleep was bad, and not really seen as like this process that we can work on towards improving.
Yeah, no, again, I've had my issues, some of it surrounding anxiety, but for me, it kind of stemmed from two different aspects. It wasn't just, the trouble falling asleep, but it was also the trouble of staying asleep. And, the trouble falling asleep lately hasn't been an issue, and some of it's largely thanks to the Thirdsy. But I'd say for me, the biggest thing that I've found is that good quality sleep. And you know, I admit I've got two kids. They're going to keep me up almost every single night. I don't think we've had maybe one night in the past, 3 months where both of them have actually slept consistently. So for me, I still don't get a great night's sleep, but the quality of my sleep when I actually do sleep is through the roof. And I track it with my watch and looking at my HRV readings and as accurate as the watches can be in kind of dictating or determining how good your sleep quality is, my REM sleep is just through the roof compared to what it was before. And when I wake up in the morning, that's kind of the difference is like, sure, I was still up for a period dealing with the kids, but when I wake up, I feel way better and I can get through my workouts compared to those nights where I definitely haven't taken it. I don't feel the greatest the next day. So for me, I definitely see a lot of value in it. And with my concussion patients, it's kind of the same thing that you've already said. We kind of see it in all stages, and a lot of people I find they don't want to take medication. I don't like taking medication. I don't want to push someone else to take a strong medication where you don't know all the side effects. So for something that's natural and doesn't really have any side effects, I don't see why not. If it gets you better sleep and then that helps recovery, I'm all for it. So that's kind of my big thing surrounding this and why I love it.
Awesome. I love
Um,
that.
so if you don't mind, I've got a few questions for
Yeah.
you. Some of it's surrounding kind of what it is, and then how it works, and I guess some of the benefits for different populations. So if you can tell me first and foremost, just for our followers here, because not a lot of them really know what Thirdsy is and I guess the ingredients to it.
Sure.
And from what I remember, you've made some changes recently to the formula a little bit.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about the ingredients and why these ones?
Yeah. So the formulation as it stands right now has 4 active ingredients. 3 are really, really more about like counteracting stimulation, helping your body to wind down, and then stimulating the things that are supposed to happen in terms of brain activity. So when we talk about sleep quality, your brain should be really active at night, and it should be going through these phases of different types of brain waves and communication between different parts of your brain. And we look at that in terms of phases. Most people have heard of REM sleep and deep sleep. And then there's also like your non-REM, non-deep sleep that kind of happens in between. And even that phase has certain characteristics around the type of electrical activities that's happening in the brain and the type of brain waves that are occurring. And all of that requires that you have certain amounts of different types of hormones and brain chemistry happening. So it's like this big complicated process of stuff that's going on in your brain. And so often when we take other stuff, like sedative stuff, it actually, unfortunately, actually shuts down the brain or keeps different parts of the brain from talking to each other. And that can be why, like, for instance, if you drink alcohol, you sleep, but you're not really sleeping, right? Like the processes aren't happening because different parts of your brain are actually gated off. So you actually basically don't do REM sleep and you don't do memory consolidation. So the ingredients that are in the product that help with that are L-theanine, which is an amino acid that's from green tea, actually, and that helps produce alpha waves in your brain. It's been shown to help with anxiety and to help with really like calming down overstimulation. So some people actually see L-theanine in energy drinks, which sounds counterintuitive, but if you take a whole bunch of stimulants, you'll get the jitters, right? Like your whole system can get overwhelmed by that level of stimulation. If you stack it with L-theanine, you will not get the overstimulation effects of those stimulants because L-theanine is so helpful in calming down your nervous system. So that's what the L-theanine does. And then the other thing that most people have heard of that's in it is magnesium. So we're currently using magnesium bisglycinate, which is a magnesium attached to a glycine molecule. And what that does is it actually helps cross the blood-brain barrier and has some specific properties towards being even more calming in your central nervous system, as opposed to getting used in other parts of your body like your musculoskeletal system. So previously we were using magnesium citrate, and that has a smaller footprint in terms of the molecule, so you can actually take less of it in terms of like your total dosing size to get more elemental magnesium, but it's not as well absorbed. So that was one of the changes that we made, was switching over to the bisglycinate. Even though it's like a much bigger molecule, we had to increase our serving size. It's just the literature, especially in the last couple of years, has shown that particularly for sleep, like that's the one you want to take. And then the third one is GABA. So GABA is your primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, which you probably know what that means. Most people maybe don't know. That's kind of science speak. Basically, it is the
In layman's
chemical.
terms.
Yeah, it's the brain chemical that helps pump the brakes on everything excitatory that's happening. So most of our brain chemicals are excitatory, right? Like acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin. These are all things that are actually like on mechanisms in the brain. And GABA is almost the only thing that helps to counteract all of those on mechanisms. And so when we're stressed, when we're busy, when we're focusing a lot, we're firing acetylcholine all day long, we need lots of GABA to help like counteract that and maintain our focus and maintain our ability to like modulate our brain states, which means that when we get to the end of the day, we can actually have insufficient GABA for actually controlling our sleep cycles. And then the fourth ingredient in it that is actually an active sleep ingredient as well is the collagen. So the collagen's in there, and it's kind of like a twofer, where the thing that it does to help with sleep is that it is a third glycine. So when you look at the molecular structure of collagen, every third amino acid is glycine. And glycine actually also can act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it can help to calm your brain down, and it can help to counteract over excitatory states. It's also been shown in studies to help decrease next day fatigue on the same amount of sleep and to improve sleep architecture. So when I was talking about all like the electrical activity and stuff like that. So 3 grams of glycine before bed has been shown on brain scans to help improve sleep architecture overnight. So the collagen's in there to help with that. And it's also in there because it has all sorts of other amino acids and peptides that are great for your body if you're trying to recover your muscles and your joint systems overnight.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
Okay, so that covers that aspect of it, because I was going to ask essentially why the collagen was in there and how that would essentially help with overall joint and connective tissue recovery. Because again, you promote it as something that is meant for, you know, athletes recovering from stress and whatnot. So I kind of want to see how that was tied into the picture, but that makes sense.
yeah.
In terms of I guess the components that are part of Third Z, how does it compare to some of the other things, the other supplements on the market, and like what differentiates it or gives it that advantage over those supplements?
Sure. So the collagen was actually probably like the thing that made me decide maybe we should make a product. Because as I was learning about glycine, as I was learning about how that affects you, and even how like taking collagen before bed can also help lower your core body temperature, which is important for deep sleep. It's donating amino acids during your most anabolic state at night, which is your first big pump of growth hormone when you hit deep sleep during the night. I was like, why doesn't everybody take their collagen before bed? Right, like I think most people, like they see all like the collagen coffee creamers, and we think about taking collagen either first thing in the morning in our coffee or around our workouts. And I started, as I was going down the rabbit hole of improving my sleep, I was like, oh, it's a no-brainer. I'm already taking collagen. I can take it before bed. It's going to actually do things to help improve my sleep architecture. And it's going to do all that other stuff that I want it to do, but do it better because it's like more appropriate timing for my other physiology.
Mhm.
And so I started looking, like before we even made our kind of like our own product, I was like looking for sleep collagens, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, why isn't this a thing? Um, and then the other thing is I would also say, like, other than the ingredients like the L-theanine, the magnesium, and the GABA, like those are fairly common to see in sleep supplements. There's not a whole lot that's unique about using those for sleep. I think especially in the last few years with people like Dr. Matt Walker, Dr. Andrew Huberman talking about these things, you're starting to see those used pretty widely. It's really more about how much we're dosing in each dose, because typically when you pick up like a bottle of pills for sleep off the shelf, there's going to be not a lot. Like you'll have those ingredients, but they'll be in insufficient amounts relative to what's actually recommended in like clinical studies for actually producing results. And then the other thing is what's not in it. And for me, it's like the really important thing was not having melatonin in the product. And there is like definitively a time and a place for melatonin. And I would say, like you've probably seen even with concussion research, like there's some research to support using melatonin for concussion patients and, for jet lag, for sleep timing issues, for older populations of people who are not keeping up with their hormone production anymore. Melatonin can be great in that population. But for people that are in their, teens to basically menopausal age, or, kind of 50-ish for men, you shouldn't be taking melatonin every day. There's like significant metabolic effects. It can play with your other hormones in ways that are not necessarily what you want. And it also works on a feedback loop where the more melatonin you're taking above what your body would naturally producing, then you develop a sensitivity to it, so you need to take more of it. That, and from a personal perspective, when I started out, I was really building my own sleep stack. I didn't feel good when I used melatonin. I had weird dreams. I overshot my sleep where I'd feel really groggy in the morning. It would kind of throw off my whole circadian rhythm of like energy and hormonal patterns for the day. I was just like, I don't understand why every single thing for sleep has melatonin in it, because it's not a sleep quality improver, it's a sleep timing improver.
Yeah, and if I've found that, especially, I mean, even before coming across third Z, concussion patients, if they had trouble sleeping or falling asleep, I should say, then melatonin was something that we would try just to, again, stay in that natural kind of realm as opposed to taking the medicated side of things. But even for me, when I've traveled or, if I've had crappy sleeps with the kids, that was kind of the thing. I always felt crappy the next morning. And I didn't find that it helped me sleep consistently through the night. It just knocked me out, so I fell asleep faster. But yeah, with the third Z, I just get that solid quality sleep through the night. And again, my concussion patients, when I've referred to them, that sleep just goes from 50% quality to right up to 80-90% right away. Some of it still just being a little anxiety piece that's kind of surrounding it, but I mean, drastic improvements right off the bat, which is always nice to see.
Absolutely.
I did have one question though. What the beetroot? How
Oh,
come beetroot?
so the beetroot powder, and there's very little beetroot powder in there. It's literally just to give it a little bit of color. Yeah, it's
Okay.
a coloring agent. So like the non-actives are like a stevia extract for sweetness. There's natural flavoring components. And then we gave it the beetroot because otherwise the powder was just kind of this like, I mean, you've seen collagen, probably just like regular
Just a
collagen. It's kind of
plain,
like this
yeah.
kind of, yeah, yellowy, cloudy. It's gross looking.
Okay.
So yeah, that was like part of the R&D. They were like, if we put a little bit of this beetroot powder in it, it's going to be a lot more appealing for people. And I was like, all right, let's go with that.
As soon as I saw the beetroot powder in there, I was like, I feel like Dwight Schrute here having the beats in the day.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not a lot. It's just a little sprinkle. Yeah.
And in terms of, I guess, the process of coming up with your supplement and going through the R&D and everything like that. How's it been for you getting feedback and testimonials from people who have tried it? Do you find that you're seeing the success that you want with Thirdsy?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, right? Because I mean, like all supplements, all even pharmaceuticals, right? There's stuff that nothing works for everybody, right? Based on whatever it is your expectations were and what you're trying to solve for. But we have about 50% of our customers have bought from us more than once. So that's been pretty cool to see that like almost half of people who have come are like, okay, this is good enough. I want to keep using it and keep buying it. And we've gotten a ton of feedback, right? Because there's people who have been like, this changed my life, like complete turnaround. And then there's people who are like, yeah, I feel better when I take it. I know it's good for me and I want to keep taking it. And then we had a few people when we first launched, like in our first few months, that reached out and were like, I actually think this made me feel more alert at night. And that was actually one of the reasons why we did end up changing the formulation. So we used to have tryptophan in the
Yeah,
formulation.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so the tryptophan is also shown to have some properties to help with like relaxing and sleep. It's that thing from turkey that can make you feel kind of tired, right? Because it's a precursor for serotonin and melatonin. But the thing about it being a precursor for both serotonin and melatonin is that for people who are taking serotonin reuptake inhibitors, so like antidepressants, or who are particularly sensitive along their serotonin pathway, taking tryptophan can actually increase their serotonin levels to a point where they feel more stimulated and more awake. And so there was this like small section of the population that was reaching out being like,
It's
I
not
don't think
helping.
this is doing what it's supposed to
Yeah.
do. And then when we had that conversation, we dug in deeper. A lot of them, it was, SSRIs or potentially they're just very sensitive on their serotonin pathway. And so we made the decision to take that ingredient out because it was really the only thing in there that we felt like might not have a great effect. Like we wanted it to be something that kind of everybody could use on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And so even though I found it effective with it, we didn't find that it dramatically, like that it changed the effectiveness in terms of like literally nobody's complained since we took it out. And now we don't have to worry that some people are going to have this like stimulatory effect from it.
And I know there's been a lot of research done on the ingredients. Has there been any type of like research done on Third Z itself, or is it more just kind of market analysis of like who's buying and what people are saying?
Yeah, so we haven't done a clinical study with our formulation like total as is. So it is the individual ingredients, and then there are some studies with combinations of ingredients. Like you can find studies on like L-theanine and GABA together, magnesium and L-theanine together, magnesium and GABA together. So we know that they play nice together, but like it's on our roadmap. I would love to work with an educational institution or university to do a trial and actually see from like a gold standard randomized control trial perspective, like what is the literature actually, what can this study produce. So that's definitely something that's in the future for us.
Like I mentioned before, I definitely have a strong interest in treating concussion patients and vestibular patients, but the concussion patients for me, they're the ones that I find have more of that sleep quality issue. And for you, like, is there anything that you can touch on, I guess, for people recovering from a concussion in terms of how Thirdsy might be able to contribute to their healing? And, this is looking at not just, the sleep quality, but also, inflammation that's happened in the body, because we know that there is some inflammation that happens throughout the body, but then also cognitive effects. Is there anything that you can comment on?
Sure. Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm sure you must have like a very interesting time working with people with concussions because they're so complex, right? Because it also depends what part of the brain has suffered, from the damage. What are the fallen effects? How much damage was there? All of those things, and there's several things that go into concussion recovery, as you know, but anytime we have brain involvement in any kind of pathology, and I'll call it concussion or pathology, there's always challenges with sleep, right? So whether we're looking at concussion, whether we're looking at people with Alzheimer's, depression, like brain health and sleep health are like very closely linked. And the thing with concussion too that's interesting is that thing about how certain parts of your brain have to talk to each other while you're sleeping for your sleep to happen properly. Depending on what part of the brain has had damage, that can impact how those different parts of the brain are producing electrical activity and talking to each other. And so that can affect whether you're getting sufficient REM sleep, whether you're getting sufficient deep sleep. And typically, I think with concussion, you'll often see REM sleep is more affected. And what that means, and you probably know this, is like emotional regulation, motor learning, all of those things are kind of like out the window. And with specifically like the PM recovery collagen, there's a couple of things that can help with that. One is like the L-theanine actually actively helps to make those alpha waves, which are characteristic of REM sleep. So it's going to start to kind of like push your brain more into that phase of regaining that level of function. But I would actually say probably even more important is also the collagen that's in there. So when you look at, what's being recommended for people with concussion, there's not a lot, like if you Google like collagen supplementation, concussion, I'm sure you're not going to get a lot of like randomized controlled trials saying like, do this. But the general recommendation is high protein diet, because we know that protein is important for supporting both neurological function as well as like the extracellular stuff, right? So the matrix, the glia, the intracellular fluid, like all those things that need to go into rebuilding parts of your brain. And specifically, like most of the protein that people think about when they're thinking of consuming protein is very poor in things like glycine or the stuff that's actually in collagen. And that's pretty much why we need to supplement with collagen, because we don't do nose to tail eating, right? We're not eating a lot of animal skin, a lot of organ meat, that kind of stuff. And so we can actually have, even if we're getting a lot of protein, gaps in the types of amino acids that we should be taking. And glycine and glutamate tend to be the two that are really problematic. And I don't know how. Sorry, I'm just like, I'm kind of
No, keep going, don't worry.
So with traumatic brain injuries, like with concussion or TBIs, whether it's car accident or whatever, there's almost always a gut component as well. And they've done studies with like animal studies where they've like induced traumatic brain injuries and then seen like basically leaky gut happen. So like an immediate effect through like some of the cascade effects through the vagus nerve of changes in the gut lining. And then they've done the opposite, where they've damaged the gut lining and then they've seen changes in the neurological function. And so you need to be addressing both of those things as well. And one of the cool things is that glycine actually helps with improving tight junctions in the gut and helping to heal the gut, which can also affect what's happening in the brain in the neurotransmitters that are produced, because like 90% of our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. So helping with both of those systems through improving not just total protein intake, but the types of amino acids you're having will also decrease inflammation, help to heal the gut, and support the brain in its rather long and slow process of regaining full function.
And inflammation and the joint and skin issues, because I've dealt with all of that in the past, so I definitely know how important a nice healthy gut is too, so I'm grateful for that. In terms of I guess for patients, concussion patients in general, that might be on medication, so you already kind of touched on how there was that kind of association with tryptophan and SSRIs, so antidepressants and things like that. How would you kind of approach someone who's unsure about taking a supplement, especially if they're already on a medication? And do you know of any other, I guess, conflicts with other medications that Thirdsea might possibly have?
So I would say definitely anything that you're.
Are those just balloons that popped up?
Yeah, I don't know What just happened? Our Instagram got excited about this topic of conversation. That's funny. There's so when we're looking at like interactions between supplements and drugs, typically the biggest thing is that we're looking at like the limitations of metabolism and particularly liver metabolism. So the vast majority of pharmaceuticals are metabolized using like the same liver enzyme pathway. I think it's P450 in your liver. And so that's why when you're taking a lot of different medications or even a lot of different supplements, you'll have a longer half-life for everything you're taking because it's going to process out of your system slower. So I would say no matter what you're taking, even if they don't directly have interactions, like all the other stuff that's in there, the GABA, the L-theanine, the collagen, and the magnesium, are not going to play poorly with just about anything. Like when you look at the literature, none of those have direct effects on basically kind of anything. I've Googled it because I've tried to find out. I've had people like reach out and be like, I'm taking this. Does that interact with that? And I'm like, I can't find evidence of negative interaction. Whereas like there are definitely some things like if they're doubling down on the same pathway that you're going to have issues with the exception maybe of saying anything that's working on your GABA pathways. So if you're taking benzodiazepines work on your GABA pathways, but the thing is that they have like a 200 times affinity for your GABA receptors as compared to regular GABA or even L-theanine that also works on that pathway. So they're not even going to kind of be a drop in the bucket in terms of what's already happening with your GABA receptors along those pathways. But if you are taking other medications, spreading them out, like I know that sounds like really maybe basic, but spreading them out, and then also you probably can go ahead with taking half a scoop or 3/4 of a scoop instead of a full scoop because it's going to stick around in your system longer. Like the regular half-life of L-theanine is about 60 minutes, but if you're taking, a lot of other supplements or some other pharmaceuticals, it might end up sticking around in your system for twice that because it's being metabolized more slowly. So that would be the biggest concern. And then of your other medications, what are the implications then if you're slowing down the metabolism of those things?
And in terms of the dosage of Third Z, so we've got a scooper in there. Do you recommend modifying that dosage from person to person, or do you find that just go with it, do one scoop is good for everyone? What's your typical recommendation with that?
That's such a good question. I mean, whenever you make a product, right, you kind of have to do a recommended dose, and you're like, this is what is probably safe and fairly effective for most people. But all of these stuff are in ranges. You know what I mean? Like L-theanine has been studied from, say, like ranges of 100 milligrams to 400 milligrams for helping with anxiety and sleep. So we dose it in the middle at like 200. But the thing is, like, I'm a 135-pound woman. There are 250-pound men using our product. So for me to be using the exact same scoop size as them, does that really make sense? So I definitely have had people reach out and say, hey, can I take a double scoop? Or, hey, I feel like this might be too much. Should I scale it down? And it's like, yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're a bigger person, you might need a little bit more. And if you're a smaller person, like anything else, you probably could err on the side of taking a little bit less. And I would say for most people, try taking less. Like minimum effective dose is a beautiful thing. Not only will it make the product last longer and be more cost effective for you, but like you don't need to overbomb your system. Even with natural healthy stuff, if you can, do half as much and get the effect that you're looking for, do that. Because you can always, go up from there too.
I got two last questions for you. One, just again, kind of relating to the dosage side of things. Is Third Z something that you'd recommend for kids?
So officially, like Health Canada officially, not recommended for people under the age of 18. And that comes back to the studies, right? Like I can't recommend it for pregnant women. I can't recommend it for breastfeeding women. We can't recommend it for kids just because there's not enough literature to support safety and efficacy in these populations that are generally considered vulnerable populations. That being said, I do actually know a number of people, and myself included. I have two stepdaughters who are 9 and 10. And when they're coming home from activities in the evening and they're like super ratcheted up and they're coming in hot, we give them usually a half scoop to split, and it really does help them to wind down and to get better quality sleep than they otherwise would get. I'm sure you see this with your kids, right? If you're coming home from like a birthday party or a soccer game or something like that, and they're wound up.
Good luck getting to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. They need help too, right? Like they need support
Yeah.
too. And I think it's actually really sad that kind of the only sleep stuff that's approved for kids is melatonin, because I don't think we should be giving our kids melatonin.
No, and I guess even the dosage guidelines on that is kind of all over the place. And, yeah, we've used it on flights and things like that to knock them out. I'd rather use a melatonin over, a medicated option.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to highlight just for some of those people that are listening in case they do have kids, if they're having sleep issues, especially, considering their anxiety levels are going through the roof, not just in adult population, but also kids. So I was just wondering if there's something that if thirds can be utilized for them just to help get a better night's sleep, and if that would play a better role for them the next day.
Yeah.
The other question I had was, I guess, again, related to the dosage side of things. On the back of the pack, you have a recommendation of how long to take it for before obviously checking in with a doctor to make sure it's safe. Is there, with certain supplements out there, some people will recommend like a cycle. So take it for 4 weeks, go off in 4 weeks, and then come back on if you want. Is there anything that you recommend in that side of things? Like, should people, take it for a week and then not take it, or is it take it as needed? How do you go about that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So with a couple of the ingredients like the magnesium and the collagen, most people are going to have more of like a loading phase with that. And particularly for MSK stuff like joint health, changes in muscle health, that kind of stuff, collagen supplementation, you don't start to see like really meaningful impacts in the literature until you're at like 12 plus weeks, right? So if you're looking at like knee OA or tendon improvements, like that kind of stuff, it needs to be consistent and it needs to be for a period of time that's typically longer than most people think. Right? Most people want to see like, why don't my knees feel better? It's been a week. Like, no, trust me.
Yeah, it takes time.
Remodeling is a slow process. And so for some of the ingredients in there, a longer period of time, and like basically with magnesium too, if you were not at sufficient levels, then the first while that you're taking it is really just going to be your body like building up its levels of that nutrient. And then you're going to be kind of at cruising altitude, and you may notice, and I have found this even for myself, that I take it pretty much every night. But if a night goes by where I don't take it, I don't find that there's a dramatic decline in my sleep quality anymore. And I think that's because I kind of have sufficiency in a lot of these nutrients now. Mm. With the L-theanine and the GABA, there might be more of a case for cycling, particularly with the GABA, but I haven't actually found any literature to support that. And I think the interesting thing with GABA is that because we are also anxious and busy and demand so much for ourselves, I think we actually like use so much of what we're able to produce naturally that supplementing that system can actually be a really good thing for most people, in that you will find that even after a few days of not taking it, that you may start to notice a decline in your mood and also your sleep regulation. So maybe for some people, but I think for most people, that's not particularly an issue. And the other thing with like building up tolerance is typically we build up tolerance to either things that work directly on receptors or have a long half-life. Caffeine is a great example of that. It does both, right? It works on your adenosine receptors and it has a fairly long half-life of like 4 to 6 hours, depending on the person. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of easier for your body to then make adaptations to downregulate its sensitivity to caffeine because it stays in your system for so long and because it works directly on receptors that will then become less sensitive to it. Whereas something like L-theanine that has a fast half-life and works along the GABA pathways but not directly on the receptors, you're not going to see as quick of a physiological adaptation to that particular thing where now all of a sudden you're desensitized to it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely good to know. Well, you pretty much answered everything. I had a few questions where you kind of just delved in and answered it anyways before I even got to it, but you got the answers out there for people for me. So that's the most important thing. So I, again, really wanted to thank you for taking the time to answer these questions for me. It was very valuable for me, and I hope really valuable for all the followers out there. And whether you could watch live or if you can watch this later and get a little bit of information from it, definitely grateful for that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Hope you have a wonderful evening. And just a reminder for those followers out there, if you are looking to try Third Z, you can use the code ARPhysio0ZZZ, and it gets you 20% off. Give it a shot. It's definitely helped me and helped a lot of my friends and patients who have had sleep issues. So it's worth a shot. So don't look down or stray away from it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on. This was fun. I love being able to
Nope.
talk about this with you. All right.
Thank you again.
Take care.
Have a good evening.
You
Take
too.
care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.